Hello, clay friends. So today we are going to learn how to wedge. We're going to talk about two different kinds of wedging and a few techniques and then how to set up your studio for proper wedging. So we are going to wedge like a brown piece of clay and a white piece of clay together so you can see the process and how they mix together. But first, let's talk about why you need the wedge in the first place. So when we look at a bag of clay, even a new bag of clay like this, we still need to wedge your clay. You still need to wedge your clay, especially if you're going to throw. So a lot of hand builders, some of them don't wedge their clay, and a lot of them do, but almost all people who throw on the wheel wedge their clay. So why is that? On the wheel, it's very important that your clay be really even as far as hardnesses, right? And when you get clay out of the bag inside is not completely uniform. There's a core, and then there's the outside of the clay, which is against the plastic, and then there's also this little opening up here that's usually mostly closed. This part of the clay can generally be a little bit harder than this part, the top part here, because maybe there's some air and stuff leaking out. And little problems and little inconsistencies like that can lead to big problems when you get to the wheel. So it's very important that we wedge the clay, and clay is a way of how we mix the clay up. Also, wedging becomes super and really important if you have a piece that you're throwing on the wheel and it fails, then it'll be wet and goopy on the outside and then kind of regular clay on the inside. You need to make sure you're able to wedge that up really good. So that's why we wedge to begin with. Let's talk about why let's talk about some of the different surfaces that we use when we wedge. So one of the surfaces that we don't want to use is a piece of plastic like this. The wedging surface needs to be porous. So this is a plastic bat. We would not want to wedge on the surface because the clay will stick and won't come off of here really easily. So you need to wedge on a surface that is porous. So what does that mean? That means water absorbs into the surface a little bit. So we will get rid of this guy. And let's talk about this. So this is a piece of HardieBacker board. So this is what I currently recommend for people to wedge on. This piece of board comes in a 5-foot by 3-foot sheet, I believe. It's called HardieBacker board. You get them at the hardware store. Get the ones that are smooth because they have ones that are rough and smooth. This is a 1/4 inch or no. This is a 1/2 inch thick, I think, HardieBacker board. They also sell 1/4 inch, but this one I got the thicker one. If you notice that on my studio table that I work on, I actually have a giant piece of HardieBacker board. You see that's on top of my wooden table, and it stretches all the way back and forth here, right? So you can see that here from that video. And then so here we can get a better view from the side shot. You see that my HardieBacker board is actually goes across my table. But for this demonstration, we are just going to use the HardieBacker board that's here. We'll put this one down. So we're going to wedge on this, and before we put it down to keep it from sliding around, we're going to put a couple of these shelf liners down, and this will just keep that board from skating around. So we'll put these shelf liners, and you notice that this HardieBacker board is smooth. It's pretty smooth on both sides. So we're just going to put these guys down. This will keep my board from skidding away. And so this means that I can wedge now on any table that I want to, right? So even if I have a wooden table here, I can still wedge on this if I want to right now. All right, so let's talk about something else. Let's talk about height and the way how the table should be positioned. So these are my hip bones right here, and I want this table a little bit lower than that, like 3 inches-ish. About that for me. That's what I've decided to be good. So how did I find my right table height? What I did is I had a shorter table, and I would take bricks and I would raise it up and lower it down by putting bricks underneath the feet. Every couple of days I would change the height until I found the table height that I liked for wedging, and that's how I discovered that I like this table height. I think it depends on your physique and how you're built and what you like to do, but in general, people like their table height a little bit, like a couple inches shorter than their hip bone for their wedging table. Okay, but I would recommend that you experiment around and try different heights because this is super important, right? The other thing that we need to talk about is how do you wedge? So I see a lot of my beginning students, they wedge like this, where they just take it, they're standing kind of straight up, or they may be leaning over a little bit as they wedge, and they'll wedge down and just using their arms. So when I wedge, I always will put one leg back and one leg forward like that. And then what I'll do is I'll actually drive with my legs when I wedge. So you'll see that when I do this, when I wedge, I'll drive with one of my legs and kind of rock back and forth this way. That way I'm able to use all of my core and driving with my whole body, right? And that just allows me to wedge bigger pieces of clay. It allows me to wedge more clay for longer, or more balls of clay, all that, you know, I'm just able to do more work that way because I'm using more of my body and actually driving with my legs. So either leg forward, whatever way you feel most comfortable, that's how you're going to wedge, okay? So let's bring this camera, the side view camera, a little bit closer, and then we will show you some wedging techniques. So let's bring this closer in so we can get a good view of what's going on. Give me a second to get it all straight out. All right, so now we have two pieces of clay here, and let's put these two brown and this two pieces of clay together so that we can see how they mix together as we wedge. So I'm just going to pad these together. Now, if your clay is a little bit dry, you can take a wet towel and just moisten the surface down, or you can spray the surface down a little bit, because I don't really need to dry out this clay that much. But if this clay was coming right off the wheel and it was really wet, I wouldn't do this part, because this Hardybacker board has a tendency to dry out the clay a little bit, which is good if you're thrown it once before, but it's not so good if it's new clay. So I have two pieces of new clay, and what we'll do first is called the ram's head wedging. So what does that mean? So we're going to take these two pieces of clay, and I'll put my hands like this, and then I'm just going to push forward a little bit and then pull it back like that. And then I'll push down and forward like that, and I'll pull it back like that. Push down and away like that, pull it forward, or pull it back, sorry, pull it down and away, roll it back toward myself, push down and away, and pull it back. So if I were to do this motion without the clay, right, here like this, and my wrist, it kind of goes down like that. So I push down like that, and then I roll it back, push down and away, and then roll it back, and then push down and away, and then roll it back. I'll do it one more time. Push down and away, and then roll it back. So I'm mainly pushing with this part of my hands, the heels part of my hands. So let's bring this piece of clay back. So you can already see that it's starting to mix up. Ooh, look, kind of looks like yin and yang there, right? So I push down and away, roll back, push down and away, right? Roll back, push down and away, roll back, push down and away, roll back. So I'm using this part and kind of pushing down like that. I can also use a little bit of side pressure as I'm doing that to kind of keep it from expanding out. But if your piece is expanding out, don't worry. I'll show you a trick for fixing that here in a second. So down and away, down and away. So I tell my students, I don't know, maybe 50 times, because they're not very good at wedging clay at the beginning. So when you start doing wedging, you have to start by doing it more times than normal, and as you get better, you don't have to wedge as much. So it's called ram's head wedging because it starts to look a little bit like a creature, right? You can see, like, if you put eyes in there, right? It's like, it's like a creature, right? So I keep wedging, and you can see how it's mixing up. So let's take a look. So it's starting to get mixed up. Let's cut this in half really fast just to see how well it's doing. Right, so you can see that that clay is starting to get mixed up. It's not very good yet, so because maybe only did it like 20 times. So let's keep going for a little bit longer. So I'll put those pieces back together. We'll just keep wedging using ram's head. So it's down and away, then I roll back, it's down and away, down and away. So I'm going to let this stretch out, and I'm going to show you what we're going to do when it starts getting too wide. So down and away, down and away, down and away. So I'm purposely letting it wide because I shifted my hands onto the top. So I'm not doing the side pressure anymore because I want to show you what to do. So it's starting to get too long to be effective, right? So what I'll do is I just turn it 90 degrees like that, and then I just let it roll up from this side here. So what I'll do is I'll bring it up, put it on its tip and push it down like that. And instead of doing much push out, I'm going to mainly just try to roll it up on itself. So push down on it mainly without pushing it out too far. Down on itself, down on itself. So now I kind of got it rolled up. Now I'm ready to start really wedging once again. So push down and away, 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 push down and away. So there you go. So you see how it's starting to get more and more mixed up. And there we go. And you can kind of see how it's starting to look better, right? And so it's starting to build up all these nice layers. So let's cut it in half again. It's probably looking a lot better than it was before. Oh yeah, so you see how that is getting pretty well wedged. You see that? That is looking pretty good. We'll do both cameras at once. Isn't that cool? That's looking great. So let's just wedge it a few more times. So we'll just keep going. So I just reversed it, right? So this is called ram's head wedging. You're doing a symmetrical push. You're pushing down and away with the heels of your hand. Down and away, and I'm using my legs to drive. I'm pretty upright. I'm kind of leaning down and pushing, thrusting down and driving with my legs as I do this. So let's just keep going for a little bit longer. If it starts getting wide, I'm letting it get wide again on purpose. So I'll show you the turnaround again. So if it gets wide, I just turn it 90 degrees and I roll it up first, and then I start wedging. Go. So you can see it's probably getting pretty good. So the whole thing starts to turn brown because a little bit of this red clay will stain the lighter clay pretty brown. So I don't know. I wasn't counting how many times I was doing it. Let's take a cut in half and let's take a look. So look at that. That's almost completely wedged up. If you see that there from both ways. So that's looking pretty good. So that is almost completely wedged, and you can see how that clay is now completely mixed up pretty good. So let's set that one aside. That is ram's head wedging. I am wedging, those were two 2-pound balls of clay. So this is a 4-pound blob of clay. Set that aside. Ram's head wedging is what I teach all my beginning students because it's a little bit easier to explain. It's pretty, you can grasp it pretty quickly, and it's pretty efficient, which you saw. Spiral wedging requires you to do 2 different things with your hands at the same time. Meaning, one hand is doing one thing and pushing away and traveling a little bit further. The other hand's doing a little bit more abbreviated motion. So let's see if we can show you what those 2 motions are. So when I'm wedging, I have the ball of clay here in my hand. I push down and away, but then the right hand for me, because I do this right-handed, the right hand travels a little bit farther, and it travels a little bit in an arc when it's pushing, right? So it's pushing and it's pushing a little bit further, and then I roll it up onto more the left-hand side, and I push down again and push down again, push down again. So let's do that in practice. So let's put the pieces of clay like that so you can watch them spiral together. So here I'll stand it up so it is on its end, and I'll kind of start by doing it just by pushing, and then you see how I just let the right hand travel farther? You see that? Boom. And then what happens, so it's starting to develop this twist in the clay. And then what I'm going to do is I'll pick it up and kind of put it on this end over here, the left hand side. So I pick it up, and so I make this side the top, and I'll do it again. I push down and away. Like that, and this hand travels further. I push down with both, but this hand travels further. I'll pick it up, push, kind of rotate it a little, push down and away, and then I pick it up on its end again, push down and away, like that. So here I'm trying to really overemphasize it, push down and away. So once again, this hand travels further, the right hand travels further. So let's just get it going. Boom, boom. So now this is spiral wedging. So you can see how it's developing those layers, right? Just like it was before. You see how it's spiraling in, but it's doing it in an asymmetrical way. So I like spiral wedging because it's a little bit more efficient, and it just allows me to keep going. And it seems to me like it feels like it mixes up the clay a little bit faster, right? You see that? So it's getting there. Let's go top down. So what is, how do you know that if you're doing it right? Well, you have kind of basically this cone shape here, right? And it comes down to this point and comes back around. So let's talk about what's going, well, let's first just cut this in half and see how it looks, right? So let's cut this in half and see how it looks. Okay, so you see how that got, I haven't been spiral wedging for that long, and you can see how it's already getting pretty mixed up together. And to me, that's a little bit faster with a little bit less work than doing the ram's head wedging. So let's put it back together, and then let's keep wedging. And so what is happening here? The clay kind of squirts out the bottom. So I'm going to make a mark here where this point is. And that piece of clay will squirt out the bottom, come around, and then come back into this and spiral back in. So let's watch that. So that's that mark there. Let's wedge it a few times. So that mark now has moved over to there. I'll make that mark again, and I'll keep spiral wedging around. So that mark has moved over to here, kind of moved down to the bottom. Let's keep going. And you see how that mark kind of flies around. Oop, I kind of got rid of it, but that mark is right there. And it comes around. So let's do that with a piece of, let's do it with a stick. So this is just a stick. I'm going to stick in the end here, and I'm going to spiral wedge this stick, and we'll watch that stick travel around. So see how that stick is already moving around. It's already down here. And then you see how that stick is coming around back up into here. Right, and now it's coming back into the clay, so it's here. So we'll just move it over to there really quick. Well, we got to take it out, so now it's there, and then I'll just keep wedging it around, and then now it's probably about there, and now it's going to fold back in and spiral back into the clay, which is great. That's why I like this. And then it's, for me, it's a lot less work, and once you get it. But the hard part is that you have to do two things at the same time. So let's just start over again, because starting the spiral wedging is the hardest part. So let's make this back into a ball as if we hadn't spiral wedged at all yet. Right, so pretend this is my 4-pound ball of clay that I want to re-wedge again. I set it down, and remember, I want to drive with my legs, so I have my legs apart. I'll be rocking back and forth, and I'll push, and then this right hand just travels further. Like that. So let's do it. So it travels a little bit further, bends that clay a little, and then I roll it back and I do it again. I push down and away like that. So like that. So it's a lot of it is the same kind of motion that we were doing with ram's head wedging, except I'm pushing that way asymmetrically, and this side's just traveling a little bit further. Both sides are moving forward, but this side just travels a little bit. Pick it up on a sip like that. Like that. There we go. So now we're spiral wedging, and we got it going again. And you can see that how this just looks pretty good. Let's cut it open to see if we did a good job using our 2 pieces of clay. Now, normally, of course, we wouldn't wedge these 2 different pieces of clay together, but we're just doing this as a demonstration. So these 2 pieces of clay I would consider as pretty good, pretty well wedged. So let's just do a bigger piece of clay. Let's just put these two big pieces of clay together, and let's wedge one giant piece of clay, right? So I would always probably want to use spiral wedging when I'm trying to wedge these 2 bigger pieces of clay, this 8-pound block of clay together, just because it's super efficient. For me, I'd rather wedge one large piece of clay and then divide it up into my cups or bowls that I want. So this is 8 pounds, so I could make 8 cups out of this. I'd rather wedge one 8-pound larger ball than try to wedge like 8 1-pound balls. So you can see how I'm wedging this up, getting it started, just wedging away using the spiral wedging technique, right, as I go around. And you can see that it's working out pretty good. Feels like I'm getting it. Right, keep wedging away, and then there we go. I kind of pick it up, roll it back toward myself, and keep wedging. And this is pretty efficient. And since I've wedged this clay up in little balls, I don't actually have to wedge this clay up that much. So when I'm wedging and I'm making a large piece of pottery, but I don't want to wedge like a 10-pound ball, I may divide it up into 3-pound balls or 3.3-pound balls, I guess, and I'll wedge those little balls up. So they're really good, and then I will wedge them. I'll just put them together for a little bit and just wedge it together like this, right? And now I have a very uniform and a beautifully wedged ball of clay. So let's talk about what I'm doing here at the end. I want to incorporate this kind of tail, this kind of end right here back in. So what I do is I just really shorten up my stroke and really just kind of roll it so that this end kind of folds in. So watch this. So instead of really pushing down and pushing out, I'm more just kind of rolling it back and forth to kind of take up that end. So I end up with this kind of shape here like that. So now it's ready to go onto the wheel and I'm ready to make some pottery. Wedging is very important because it is the kind of the key to making good pots. If you mess up your wedging, it's very difficult for you to make a good pot on the wheel because the pot will be all messy and all wobbly and everything. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.